Hello. Today we're going to be finding exact trig values using reference angles. So what a reference angle is an acute angle made with the x-axis. So let me actually show you what I'm talking about here. So in the first example here, we have 130 degrees. So we want an acute angle made with the x-axis. So the angle closest to the x-axis would be this smaller angle here. Now, how do we actually find that angle here? Well, think about it here. If this is 130 degrees and this is 180 degrees, we just undershot, 180 degrees. By how much? Well, to find out how much, we just have to take the difference between the two angles. So 180 minus 130, and that'll give us 50 degrees. So this smaller angle here is 50 degrees. And that would be our reference angle. The reference angle to 130 degrees is 50 degrees. Now in this second example here, we have 220 degrees. So again, we want the acute angle made with the x-axis here. So this is an acute angle and it's made with the x-axis. And again, we just have to find the measure of that angle here. So if this is 220 degrees, and that's 180 right here, then we just have to take the difference between the two angles to find, again, our reference angle. So do 220 minus 180. And that will give us 40 degrees. So the measure of this acute angle here is 40 degrees. And again, this would be our reference angle to 220 degrees. Now in this last example here, if we have 330 degrees, what do you think this smaller angle would be right here? And again, a full rotation is 360 degrees, and we're just a little under 360 degrees. By how much? Well, by 30 degrees. And again, to find that, all we really did was take the difference between the two angles. 360 minus 330 gives 30 degrees. And that is what a reference angle is. Now let's actually apply these in something like cosine of 135 degrees. Now first, to attack this problem, I like to draw a coordinate plane. I'll label my angles here. So this is 0 degrees, or 360. This is 90, 180, and 270. So we want 135 degrees, so that's somewhere in the second quadrant. Say this is 135. Now we just want to find the reference angle of 135 degrees here. So we want this smaller angle with the x-axis. And to find that, well, we don't quite have 180, we have 135, and we just have to find the spacing between these two different angles here. So we subtract, and that'll give us 45 degrees. So instead of doing cosine of 135 degrees, we can actually think of cosine of 45 degrees. However, that's not quite true yet. Let's just make a simple observation here. Now, notice with this angle here, we get a right triangle. Now, we already said this is 45 degrees. And this becomes one of our special right triangles. In this case, since we're looking for cosine, we're looking for the x-axis, the x component of this triangle here, because that would be the adjacent side of this angle. The only issue here is that we're actually in the second quadrant, so we have a negative x value for this x component here. So that means we have to put in a negative in our equation down here. Again, the reason being is because we have a negative x value in the second quadrant. So cosine of 135 is equal to negative cosine of 45 degrees, because we're using our special right triangles here. Now, if you don't remember what cosine of 45 degrees is, you can always just refer to your special right triangles. We'll use this angle here. Cosine would be 1 over root 2. Or alternatively, while rationalizing the denominator, we get root 2 over 2. So the answer to our problem is negative root 2 over 2. And that's the final answer here. Now things get a little confusing with the changing of the sign here, and I mean changing of whether it's positive or negative, but there's actually an easy way to remember, and that's all students take calculus. Now what this actually tells you is whether your trig value will be positive or negative. All means every single trigonometric value in the first quadrant will be positive. Students, S in the second quadrant, stands for sine. So that means sine will be positive and everything else will be negative. And take, as you can guess, is tangent. And I'll tell you that tangent is positive, everything else is negative, the third quadrant. Calculus, you can guess, is cosine. Cosine is positive and everything else is negative. And that happens in the fourth quadrant. And just to add a little note, if sine is positive, that also means cosecant would be positive because, it's just the reciprocal of sine. Same goes for tangent. If tangent is positive, cotangent will also be positive. All the other trig values will be negative, however. And again for cosine. If cosine is positive, so is secant. So let's approach this next problem here. Tangent of 225 degrees. Now again, I'll just draw out my coordinate plane. And I know the angle, or I'll actually label all the angles on my coordinate plane. 0 degrees, 360, 90, 180, and 270. So our angle of interest is 225 degrees. I can see it's somewhere in the third quadrant here. This is 225. And again, we want to use our reference angle. We want to use the smaller angle with the x-axis, and that's this angle here. And again, to find this smaller angle, it's just the difference between 225 and 180. So 225 minus 180 will give us 45 degrees. So again, we'll just use that instead of 225. So we have to put down tangent of 45 degrees. And now we have to determine whether this is positive or negative. So 225 is in the third quadrant. And I'll just draw it real quick. All students take calculus. So since we're in the third quadrant, that's take. So that means tangent will be positive. So tangent of 225 is equal to positive tangent of 45. And to find tangent of 45, we can just refer to our special right triangles. See, so if this is our angle here. Tangent would be 1 over 1, or just 1. So tangent of 225 is equal to positive 1. Now here's our last example. So again, we'll draw the coordinate plane just to help visualize the problem. Label our angles, 0 or 360, 90, 180, 270. And we'll actually draw out our angle, 330 degrees, somewhere fourth quadrant. And we want to use a reference angle, which is the smaller angle right here with the x-axis. So if this is 330, and this whole thing is 360, we just have to take the difference between the two angles, and that'll just give us 30 degrees. So this smaller angle is 30 degrees. So sine of 330 will be equal to sine of 30, but now we just have to determine whether it's a positive value or negative value. So again, I'll quickly draw. All students take calculus. So we're in the fourth quadrant. That means cosine is positive and everything else is negative. And we have sine here, so we actually know that that will actually be negative, since, you know, it's not cosine or secant. So we just have to do negative sine of 30 degrees. And if you forgot what sine of 30 degrees is, again, we'll just use our special right triangles. So this is 30 degrees here. Sine will be 1 over 2, so 1/2. So we'll have our negative 1/2. So sine of 330 degrees is equal to negative 1/2. Now that's it for today. Hope this video was helpful, and good luck on your exams.